right, and thank you for tuning in to Chompin at the Bit. This is episode number 67. I'm Kyle Edwards, of course, and what we do here, talk sports, of course. Take a look at kind of the big stories of the day and kind of what's on my mind. So what's on my mind for today, the NFL teams that didn't make the playoffs. I kind of want to look at them, all 18 of them that didn't make it, and kind of see what's their biggest question going into the offseason. And I guess by doing that, if these teams can answer that question, finding the right free agent or draft pick, if it's a coaching question, hiring the right coach, anything like that, then maybe they can turn it around and make themselves a playoff team come next year. The NFL, more than I'd say any other league, prides itself on parity. So a team like Jacksonville, who went 1-15 this year, they make the right moves. They bring in the right coach because they did fire Doug Marrone. We pretty much know the number one pick they're going to take, Trevor Lawrence, but the picks that follow that are just as important because you're going to have to put pieces around Trevor Lawrence. And usually when you bring in a young quarterback, you want to bring in, young offensive linemen and all that to really set the rookie quarterback on a course of success. So, all these teams, they do stuff like that. They could find themselves, example again, Jacksonville, maybe next year from 1-15 this year, maybe next year they're 7-9. And then there's optimism building there. And then the following year, you plug in some more holes. And then the second year with Trevor Lawrence, you're 9-7 or something. So we'll do that with each of the teams, run through them quickly. And don't worry, the teams that are in the playoffs, we will talk about them. That's going to be later on this week when we get closer to wild card weekend. We have 3 games Saturday, 3 games Sunday. So we'll worry about them later. But for this episode, the focus, the teams that didn't make the playoffs. So let's just go ahead and get started. So why not use the team I use in my example, Jacksonville. So like I said, Jacksonville 1-15. They got their number 1 draft pick thanks to the Jets, winning their second game late in the season. But Jacksonville's probably, it's foregone conclusion that they're going to take Trevor Lawrence. The whole Gardner Minshew era as a starting quarterback in Jacksonville, it's most likely over. But you're at the top of the draft. You have to take the guy who can turn around your franchise the quickest. Normally that's your quarterback. And if Minshew wasn't the guy, which he's shown he wasn't the guy there, then you have to go back in and get Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence is seen as a can't-miss prospect, so that makes at least that position locked down for the next 10 years or so. And then, as I also said, their work doesn't stop there because with a new coach, you got to bring in a coach who's going to help Trevor Lawrence, get used to the NFL game as well as develop. So I do think Jacksonville needs to go offensive minded, which most teams, at least in this era of football, look offensive minded coaches first. Just a quick side note, I do think with younger quarterback teams, you're probably better off going offensive minded. With your veteran teams, if you're making a change, I think there you could probably get away with a defensive-minded coach as long as that coach, like in the interview process, has the right vision for an offensive guy to bring with them. I think a lot of times defensive coaches worry so much about defense that they don't pay attention to offensive philosophy. I think that's where a lot of defensive coaches get in trouble when they get hired on with some of these teams. So, I mean, not every defensive coach is Bill Belichick, where he's shown that, he can put guys in those offensive roles, whether it's Josh McDaniels, Charlie Weiss, Bill O'Brien, guys like that, and have success offensively. But Belichick also, will, dip his toe into the offensive playbook and have some input on that side of the ball. So he's a little different. I think kind of would hurt a guy like Rex Ryan, who's now an analyst. He was a defensive-minded coach, but he didn't really care about offensive game planning. So a lot of times his teams were great defensively and completely anemic offensively, which led to them kind of hitting a ceiling of being like one and done in the playoffs. So that's where these teams are dealing with these coaching openings. So I think ultimately for Jacksonville, I guess the best bet would be like Eric Bieniemy from Kansas City. I'm not really sure if Bieniemy would take that job, but I'm sure that's probably where they will go first. And then I know the name being thrown around is Urban Meyer. I wonder with Urban Meyer, will he be a Pete Carroll, where Pete Carroll had success at USC, went to the Patriots, did a pretty good job there. I think he went back to college for a couple of years and then came back out, went to Seattle, and we all know, won a Super Bowl or two there, been to another Super Bowl, so he's had success there. If Jacksonville does go after Urban Meyer, they better hope that's what they're getting, as opposed to getting your, Nick Saban, Steve Spurrier types, where successful in the college game, get in the NFL, can't really captivate the locker room, and find themselves back in college in a few years. So Jacksonville does have those two decisions to make. Move on to the next team, Houston. So Houston, they got rid of Bill O'Brien, who was a coach GM there, and basically once he made the DeAndre Hopkins move, you knew his days were numbered. So Watson now gets a clean slate with a new coach. They had Romeo Crennel as the interim, but he's not in the mix because, he's an older defensive guy. So, yeah. I do... Interestingly enough, though, the Texans, I believe they signed Nick Caserio from the Patriots staff to be their new GM. So I wonder, did they make that move hoping that Caserio will then bring Josh McDaniels there? We know that Caserio has been... Well, the Texans themselves have tried to get Caserio for like 3 years now. I think the closest they got was last year, but ultimately he stayed in New England. But now he is going down there and to take on the GM role, which is, I guess, the role that he shared in New England with Belichick or something. Not really sure what Caserio's full role was in New England, but it was rumored that he was kind of a GM there. But now he's in Houston where he gets the title. So, good for him. But like I said, maybe this is the first move to then leading to Josh McDaniels being named the new coach in Houston. If it's not Josh McDaniels, once again, Bieniemy, that's probably the job he's going to want to get. Because as an offensive mind, having Deshaun Watson, who led the league in passing yards this year, it would be a dream come true for Bieniemy, and will probably be the job that would set him up for the most success. So I do think Houston isn't that far off from being in the mix in that division. I kind of think their main issue is going to be getting the right coach to work with Deshaun Watson. Because if you look at their offensive weapons, I guess offensively you probably use a young running back, but you get those later in the draft, so that's no big deal. Guess you could bring in another wide receiver. This year they had Stills, Cooks, Fuller. Although, didn't they let go of Kenny Stills or something? But yeah, I would probably get a young wide receiver, a running back later in the draft, and then probably go on the offensive line. And, bring in a couple pieces defensively. I think Houston will be fine, but just get the right coach to work with Deshaun Watson. The Raiders, who had an up and down season, started off well, big win over the Chiefs. Then they kind of hit their bye week and fell off a little bit. Had a couple of wins late, but then lost a couple of key matchups late in the year and ultimately missed the playoffs. So I believe they went 8-8. So I think their biggest issue is the quarterback position. I think the word is John Gruden isn't that big on Derek Carr, sorry. So Carr will most likely be on the move. Not sure, but they do have Mariota there as the backup. I think Mariota signed a 2-year deal, so if Gruden does move on from Carr, then Mariota would probably be the starting quarterback next year. And Mariota in spot duty for the Raiders this year was pretty good, so not saying Mariota is your long-term answer, but he's a guy who can get you through for the next couple of years, I think. And also in that time, you can draft maybe a mid-round prospect at quarterback, have him sit behind Mariota and see if maybe you can get something there. But if you look at it everywhere else, running back, you have Josh Jacobs. You're good to go there. Wide receivers, you have Renfro, Ruggs. You have Waller, the tight end, wide receiver combo. So if it is Gruden's plan to have Mariota run that offense, he does have parts there. Defensively, I think they could probably use some pieces in the linebacking area and in the secondary. But to me, the biggest deal is Derek Carr the guy for Gruden going forward? Does he want Mariota? Or does he possibly go into the draft, get a young quarterback, and either throw him out there next year or let Mariota groom him for a year or two? Next thing we look at, the Broncos. Where to start with the Broncos? I know an issue for them is, this year at least, they had a lot of COVID issues and a lot of injuries themselves. So they do need to get Phillip Lindsay healthy, Cortland Sutton, the wide receiver, healthy. I guess figure out the quarterback position. I thought Drew Lock was their guy, but it kind of seems like he's not. Or maybe he is, and I don't know. There's some interesting issues going on in Denver where I'm not really sure if they're completely sold on Drew Lock. But I feel like Drew Lock is still a young guy, so he should be at least a quarterback that they, give at least a full year to see what he can do. But I'm trying to think, what is Denver's biggest issue? I would say it's probably Drew Lock and, having him take that next step, because I do think Denver is a team that they might be a year or two away from really competing in that division. well, we'll say for a playoff spot, because it looks like Kansas City's probably going to win that division for the next few years here. But Denver's a team that wants to at least get into the wild card consideration next couple of years. I do know that John Elway is no longer the GM there. He's been elevated to a different role. So they will be bringing in a GM. So that's something to watch, because maybe GM comes in, decides to maybe let Fangio go, because I'm starting to believe that Fangio isn't the right guy there. So that's something to watch. Do they make a move in the coaching situation, and maybe that fixes what their issues have been? So for Broncos, I'll say, who do they bring him as GM, and does that GM give Fangio a chance to prove to them that he's the guy, or does he look at Fangio from this year, last year, and just decide, well, let me bring in my own guy. We'll kind of start it over that way and see if maybe the new coach can't get something out of Drew Lock that Fangio couldn't. Okay, next team, the Eagles. I guess since I'm bringing up the Eagles, I need to talk about this whole Doug Peterson situation. I think Doug Peterson is an overrated coach. I get it. He has a Super Bowl win over the Patriots, and it seems like a lot of times with these analysts, you get a win like that over a Patriots team, they automatically elevate you to a level that you're probably not supposed to be at. And I think they did that with Peterson, because since that Super Bowl, what has Peterson done in Philly? I'll give you the answer. He's done nothing. So, but it looks like he's going to stay there. So, whatever. That's Philly's issue. My question is, did Peterson lose parts of that locker room with that circus that he created the last week when they went up against the Washington football team? The Giants were sitting at home watching the game, needing Washington to lose in order for them to make the playoffs. And then basically midway through the game, Peterson threw in the towel. His reasoning was he wanted to see what Sudfeld had, even though he's been there for 3 years. Why randomly you pick week 17 to see what he has, when if you really want to see what he had when Wentz was first starting to struggle, you could have threw Sudfeld out there first, let him play a game or two, and then maybe you go to Hurts. But you waited for the very end to make the move from Wentz. Then you went to Hurts. You gave Hurts a couple of weeks, and then you just pulled him for no reason. Just put Sudfeld in. Sudfeld was trash, and Washington ended up winning, getting the division, all that. So my question is, I guess, what do you do with Carson Wentz? He's basically said, I'm not going to be a backup. Makes sense, because Philly can't really pay what they're paying Wentz to a backup. So where exactly do you look to move him? And yeah, then I guess you start your building with Hurts as your main guy. You try to get him a wide receiver. And, well, tight end there should be set with Goddard, who was hurt. Ertz, I believe, has a year or two left there. But find Hurts a wide receiver. That's, I guess, number one for the draft. Get him a couple offensive linemen as well. And then go from there. So big issue for the Eagles. What do you do with Wentz? Where do you send him? What can you get back for him? I mean, maybe they, I guess, give a call to Belichick in New England, see if Belichick is interested in Wentz. I don't know, but that's a place I guess you could start. But yeah, What do you do with Carson Wentz? Next, 49ers, to me, I guess, well, the 49ers need to get a quarterback because it seems like Garoppolo is done there as he's had injury-plagued seasons for the 49ers. So I think they're at a point where they're going to move on, go into the draft. Well, actually, they may go free agent route for a quarterback because looking around, you have Wentz. So maybe 49ers putting a call to see what they have to give it to get Wentz. You have Cam Newton. If what Adam Schefter said was a Sunday is correct and Newton's going to be moving on, well, parting ways with New England mutually. If the 49ers were impressed by anything Cam Newton did this year, there's a guy. Another team that we'll talk about. So the Falcons have a quarterback in Matt Ryan. Maybe putting a call there. But yeah, so the 49ers could probably go the free agent route. But if they do that, they'll probably draft a quarterback anyway. So expect the 49ers to draft a quarterback at some point this draft. And I think that's probably their biggest question. Well, they also have Raheem Mostert, who reportedly wants out. He was the leading rusher for the team last year. I know he dealt with injuries and all that this year, but it seems like his time in the Bay Area is up. So probably have to bring in a free agent running back there as well, or maybe draft one, whatever. At least a new quarterback and then a new running back, what the 49ers are going to need. So, let's see, moving on. Carolina. Carolina's in full transition mode, so they have a lot to play with here. Matt Rule, I guess you could say for his first year, wasn't a bad year. They did find out that Bridgewater is a quarterback that they can go for the next couple of years with. As long as they can keep him upright and healthy, they should be set there for the next couple of years. So I guess the biggest thing will be, what has Matt Rule learned in his rookie season as a coach that he can take with him into his second year and help the team get better? Simple as that. Only because, like I said, they're already in transition mode in terms of talent on the field, so they already have a plan there. But now is how quickly can Rule, I guess, get more accustomed to the NFL game and get better, I guess, at making the talent on the field perform better. Next to the Cardinals, the team that kind of surprised to see not be in the playoffs this year. It seemed like they had figured it out early on, but then as the season went on, it seemed like Kyler Murray was taking more hits than earlier on, and then those hits eventually built up to him having leg injuries the past couple of weeks, which looked like hampered his ability to play, and ultimately cost the Cardinals a playoff spot. But I would say overall, they had a successful year. So their question going into next year is, I guess one, it's probably going to be a two-part question. So one, Larry Fitzgerald, is he coming back for another year? I kind of think he probably will. Because what I saw from Fitzgerald, he could still play. So it seems like he's still having fun. So I wouldn't be mad if he came back another year. I would say they probably should, get another receiver there for Fitzgerald's backup plan. But I think ultimately their only question is just getting Kyler Murray to keep progressing. He's clearly a quarterback on the uptick, so you would expect that next year he'll be a little better than this year. And if he's just a little bit better, then they should be a playoff team. So Cardinals is just get Kyler Murray to up his game just a little bit. The Jets, the good old Jets, went 2-14, missed out on the number 1 pick. So for them, the interesting dilemma that they have is the consensus is Sam Darnold's done. You're going to draft, I guess, Justin Fields number 2 and just go on from there. But, so for you Jet fans, what would you do if they came out and said, Darnold's their guy. We've just fired Adam Gase. So our thinking is we bring in a coach to work with Darnold. And then that way, with the number 2 pick, we're not pressured into taking a quarterback that maybe necessarily we don't like since we're missing out on Trevor Lawrence. So we take the number 2 pick. I guess trade down to a team that's really desperate for a quarterback. Maybe like jeez, I don't know. Because Jaguars already got 1. So maybe they call San Francisco and say, hey, you want the number 2 pick? And, we'll give you, I don't know, whatever. Well, sorry. So say like the number 2 picks for sale. Give us your number 1, of course. Like a number 1 next year. A number, 3 this year, and whatever else it takes to go up there. You do that. Keep Darnold. New coach to work with him. And then use the extra picks for offensive line help, wide receiver, probably a running back, and then kind of see if the next coach can, catch lightning in a bottle and turn Darnold into the quarterback that he was supposed to be coming out of USC. So that's one way to do it. The other one is, you tell Darnold, it's been nice knowing you. You take Justin Fields and you start the transition this offseason, because ultimately Justin Fields will probably take a couple of years to really start producing, and plus he's not the only piece it's going to take for the Jets to be a good team. So it's 2 ways to look at it. So which plan are the Jets on? The Justin Fields is the guy we need, and we're going to go forward with him and change our team, and new coach, of course. Or, hey, whoever they sign, here's Sam Darnold, figure out what's wrong with him, and we'll get you some other pieces to go around him. That's the Jets' dilemma. Next, Chargers. They just fired Anthony Lynn. I mean, I feel like it just had to be done. This year seemed like a really bad year for Anthony Lynn. So, ultimately, he lost his job. I think he will probably be a coordinator somewhere next year, but head coach, probably not. So, I mean, that was the first shoe to fall for them. So now the question is, who do they bring in out there? They have Herbert at the quarterback. They have Keenan Allen and all that wide receivers. You got Eckler, Eckler and Jackson in the backfield. I think defensively they have Bosa, Ingram, guys like that. So for them, it's very simple. Anthony Lynn's gone. Get the right coach. go offensive-minded coach to work with Herbert. So, of course, you're going to hear Bieniemy there. I would say Brian Dable out there. Josh McDaniels has said he wants to be a head coach. I would think that's probably a job he would take with Herbert being there. So there's some names for them, just throwing it off the top of my head. Look for one of those names out in the Chargers and then see if Herbert can make that a little bit of a jump next year. And I mean, the Chargers should be okay. Lions. Here's the question. Matt Stafford. What are you doing with him? Is he your guy moving forward? He's 32 right now. I mean, he's been there for years now. The team doesn't really seem like they're any closer to a playoff spot now than they were a few years ago. Is Stafford a guy that you can trade, get some draft capital for? Once again, you can call a team, New England, see if they're interested. You can call the 49ers, see if they're interested. Get picks. Go with a young guy and just start it over. I mean, I just don't know if Stafford stays there. I don't know if we're not going to be having the same conversation next year. So that's my question for them. Make a decision on Matt Stafford. If Stafford's going to stay, then get him a coach who can, I don't know, just it feels like Detroit needs so much. Because I feel like you need defensive help, offensive line, wide receivers. They have DeAndre Swift as a running back. They should be set there, but I feel like everything else they probably need at least one person. So maybe ultimately it turns into Stafford asked to be traded or something. But either way, Stafford is what you need to see there. What happens with him? The Giants. Giants are an interesting team because it seems like defensively they've finally come around. I think the only issue there is keeping Daniel Jones healthy. I do think if Jones were healthy and played every game this year, there's a good chance the Giants probably would have won that division and have been in the playoffs. So I don't think the Giants have to do anything too drastic. Just make sure they can keep Daniel Jones upright and keep him healthy. That's it for them. It's not too bad. Even though we're 6-10, I do think, like I said, Daniel Jones led team, they're better than 6-10. The Vikings. Where to begin? I guess I'm looking at Kirk Cousins. I think it's pretty obvious right now. Kirk Cousins is a guy who, if he's your starting quarterback, you're not going to be terrible because he's not that bad of a quarterback. You're also not going to be like a 13-14 win team because I do think he's limited and he still has this weird like primetime game issue that he needs to work out because it seems like whenever Vikings are on primetime, that's when Kirk Cousins performs the worst. But then again, Vikings are only like primetime like once or twice a year, so that's no big deal. But it does seem like Kirk Cousins has a ceiling of like 10 wins. Now, ultimately, that should get you in the playoffs, but it really doesn't get you to a title. So I don't know if Kirk Cousins is a championship winning quarterback. But I'm also not putting the Vikings' issues all on him. So I'm trying to think, is he really the biggest question with the Vikings? I mean, they have Dalvin Cook, who's their star running back. He does seem to get nicked up for a couple of games at least each year. I think coaching, they're fine. Like defensively, they probably could improve. It seemed like a few years ago their defense was pretty good, and Kirk Cousins kind of wasn't ready for prime time in Minnesota. And then now it seems like, I mean, Kirk Cousins is what he is, but it seems like the defense did regress somewhat. So I think they probably should look defense in the draft, but I also don't think the Vikings are too far off from being a playoff contending team. All right, coming on to like the last 5 here. Try to get through these quickly. Cowboys, what are you going to do with Dak Prescott? I mean, it's Jerry Jones. We have no idea what he's thinking. So, I mean, it seems like all signs point to them wanting to give, I guess, Prescott his job when he's ready. With an injury like that, though, you just never know. So I guess leaving Prescott is kind of the wild card there. Big question, Ezekiel Elliott, what is the deal with him? And mainly the fumbling issues. That's become a real problem. And for a guy who's supposed to be a top running back in the league, you can't have him putting the ball on the turf as many times as Ezekiel Elliott does. Also seems like in terms of rushing yards, it seems like his production has gone down past couple of years. So they need to figure out what's up with Ezekiel Elliott. Next, the Bengals. I feel like there's really not much to say for the Bengals because they have their guy, Joe Burrow. And Joe Burrow was showing that he was ready for the league, just that he unfortunately got hurt. So I feel like you can't really do anything. Well, I mean, you could bring in pieces until Joe Burrow's ready to go. I mean, they're probably going to need a wide receiver to ultimately replace AJ Green. Because I can honestly say I've heard basically nothing from AJ Green this year. And that's probably a sign of maybe what's going on there. So I would say get a replacement or at least somebody to supplement AJ Green so that when Burrow does come back, there are some weapons there waiting for him. Dolphins. Once again, like the Cardinals, I was shocked the Dolphins didn't make the playoffs, but I guess their ultimate question is Tua. I guess next year, Brian Flores should probably just let Tua be the starter from game 1 and just let him ride it out. Don't go through this, pull him, put him back out there the next week, pull him, put him back out there, pull him, put him back out there. I think that's ultimately just going to stun his development. Just stick him out there, let him get through, work through the mistakes and all that. And once you get to that point, then you can actually evaluate him and see if he is the right guy going forward. Because there were times this past year, where early on Tua looked like he was probably the next big thing in the NFL, but then as defenses were getting tape on him, he really struggled late in the year. So I would like to see them figure out what they have in Tua. Now down to the final 2 teams. Go with the Falcons. Falcons, for me, biggest thing. I guess to Arthur Blank and Dimitrov is gone. So whoever the GM's going to be, do you have the guts to, I guess, end this whatever it is with Julio Jones? I mean, I've been saying for a few years now, Julio Jones ain't it, okay? All these people who think Julio Jones is the best wide receiver in the league, he's not. I will say it again, he is not. There are a number of wide receivers that I would take over Julio Jones today, no question. I'll give you a few. Keenan Allen, I would take him. DeAndre Hopkins, take him. Mike Evans, take him. I was going to say Antonio Brown, but he's too much of a head case, so no, I'm staying away from that one. Odell Beckham, I'd take him. And there's others out there, but Stephon Diggs, I would take him over Julio Jones. So I gave you 5 right there off the top of the head, and there, like I said, there are other wide receivers I would take over Julio Jones. So I think Atlanta needs to look themselves in the mirror and finally come to the realization that Julio Jones is not going to get you a Super Bowl. His legacy in Atlanta will be the 28-3 game because, I mean, not all on him, but they didn't close it out, and ultimately that was the closest he and Matt Ryan came to a title. I'm afraid that Matt Ryan's probably going to get Matt Ryan might get the boot, and I do think if they make that decision, depending on who, I guess, they brought in to replace him, I might be able to get behind that. But I think Matt Ryan is a guy who could stay as long as you fix the offensive line in front of him. That's a lot of the issues with Matt Ryan. But hopefully the new coach who comes in does realize that Calvin Ridley has shown that he could become the focal point in the passing game. So I mean, Julio Jones is 30, 31 or something. So, and he's always hurt already. I think Atlanta needs to move on from him. And of course, get the right coach, but we'll see how that goes. Final team, Patriots. Simple. What do you do at the quarterback position? So as I say all the time, Patriots are my favorite team. Born and raised in Boston, so always been a Patriots fan. But I guess backing up real quick, being in Atlanta, I do watch the Falcons a lot too, so that's why I left those two teams for last. But last team, Patriots. Figure out the quarterback position. Cam Newton said all the right things, had the right attitude on the field. The players loved him. But ultimately, performance-wise, he just didn't cut it this year. Now, if Belichick wants to put it as, Newton, that Cam didn't have a full offseason and all that to really get to learn the players, I guess you could sell me on that for another year. But from what I saw, I do think they have to go elsewhere, whether it's in the draft. I think they're picking 13th or something. So in that area, what are you going to get? Would Trask be on the board, the guy from Florida? I don't know if Mac Jones would be there, but is he a guy who might be down in that area? Do you go there? Do you go defensively? Because they had a lot of opt-outs defensively, and they have a lot of guys who are getting a little older. So They could definitely use some defensive help. They also need wide receivers. So here we go. We'll wrap it all up in one question here. Well, one job they have for the offseason. I guess hit on draft picks. I think this is a year for the Patriots to probably take a bunch of safe picks, but guys that they know will be able to contribute. No more projects or anything like that. Well, if they're going to do that, save those for later rounds. Like at 13, I hate to do this, but I don't want to hear a guy that I've never heard from. Like last year, they took Duggar. What was that? Early second round or something. Knew nothing about him. Ultimately, he turned out to be a good player, at least so far. But I just think this year, just give me guys that I've seen play, like big name college football, and produced. Get those guys, put them in, find your quarterback and all that. And hopefully this, 1 year absence from the playoffs is truly just a 1 year deal, because I like seeing my Patriots in the playoffs. That's I'm gonna feel weird for this year not being able to see them. So if Patriots knock it out of the park in the draft, there you go. I guess side note, if you lose Josh McDaniels, I guess replace him with a offensive mind that can be creative. So, but yeah, there you are. That was my look at the NFL teams that didn't make the playoffs. Kind of their questions and what they need to do in the offseason to try to turn it around. But yeah, some of these teams have a little more hope than others. But like I said earlier, the NFL, it's a really weird league, and you never know what's going to happen from year to year. Which ultimately is the reason why it is probably the most popular sport here. So have that. But let's see. Yeah, just looking ahead to the rest of the week. I want to talk about, probably some NBA next episode. Talk about some storylines going on there. Talk about the rookies. Some rookies are performing well, others aren't. Kind of look into why. I do think there's an overlying reason for that. So we'll talk about that. And later on in the week, we'll get you guys ready for the playoffs this weekend. It's going to be actually a pretty nice weekend. Like I said, 3 games NFL playoffs Saturday. You got 3 games NFL playoffs on Sunday. Then Monday, you got college football championship. So we'll look at that matchup between Ohio State, Alabama, break that down, figure out who should win it. I'm pretty sure I know who's the favorite's going to be, but we'll still take a look at the matchup and see what's going on there. And then, yeah, that should kind of close out the week. And then we'll just worry about what's going on next week at that point. So, but yeah, thanks for tuning in. There's always something going on in the sports world. So, hopefully your New Year's going well. Plan is to, I'm still working up to probably getting at least 5 episodes out to you every week. So we will see, working towards that. But yes, thanks for tuning in. You can follow the show's Facebook page, Chompin at the Bit, and give the show a follow there. That way, whenever new episodes are uploaded, you can get them from there. You can also follow the show, Twitter at Chompin Podcast, all one word. Capital C on Chompin, capital P on Podcast. Interact with the show there as well. I do put up polls there from time to time. Also tweet on there, of course, so you can interact with me there. And wherever you are listening to this, as the show is available on all, I guess, major platforms, definitely hit the subscribe button. It would help out a lot as well. But yeah, so thanks again. Be safe out there. God bless, of course. And I'll catch you in the next episode where, as I said, we'll go back to some NBA talk. So, all right.